Hello everybody and welcome to another Classic WoW with Mao podcast. I am joined with my co-host Mythoclast here. How you doing today, Myth?
Doing great, Mao. How are you?
Well, I've been doing pretty good, getting in my third week of PvP, but as a lot of people have found out in the WoW community this week, little bit of a issue with the honor standings as we're coming to find out. So yeah, that's been the big one this week, is the honor is not been updating properly. Sent a big shockwave through the community this week. The blue post has gone up about it, but I would still say feelings are a little uneasy still with the honor issues.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even as someone who's not like actively ranking, I've noticed it. Like, I did some PvP the other night and lost most of my kills.
Yeah, I'm sitting this week at what I would estimate maybe half of my kills have not seemed to be properly recorded this week, and I'm hearing reports from other people that it's ranged anywhere between like maybe a quarter of their kills to, you know, as large as 3/4 of their kills. Some people were even saying that they got kills that they didn't think they had gotten, so there was definitely something wrong with the recording. There was a blue post from 10 days ago about a caching issue, and a lot of people had thought this had been the same issue, but the blue post had confirmed this is completely separate, but they did assure us that kills are being recorded, although I would still say there's still some nervous PvPers right now.
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, even non-PvPing, I noticed all of the small amount of work that I put in this week basically like disappear. And even though the blue post states that all of them are still being recorded, I mean, you can't. It's hard to have any faith in it when you look and there's just no numbers there.
Yeah, and without it kind of updating or kind of catching up to the update, everyone that I've talked to has sort of taken this like wait and see, like Tuesday is going to be Judgment Day basically. Did everything get cleared up okay, or is this issue ongoing and we're still trying to figure it out? I personally am hoping that it's just it is a display issue. They do manage to get things straightened out. One difference I've noticed too, and one thing that was talked about, I believe, in the blue post is they used to take the servers down every week for maintenance. They're now down to about an hour of downtime, and this used to be like a all morning thing on Tuesdays when they would do these calculations. So technology being different, I think, plays a little bit of a part in it as well.
Yeah, for sure. I remember you never wanted to be absent from school on a Tuesday. If you were sick, it was always nothing to do in the morning.
Yeah, this is the one day a week where World of Warcraft couldn't have gotten you out. And it's, nowadays we have about an hour of downtime per week of this game, which is, pretty large contrast from what we had before. But we're starting to see with a system that's just this complex and has this many moving parts and it's not getting tracked properly. And this kind of also goes back to what was happening even earlier than this, people have been reporting almost like a dead zone between 3 a.m. and 9 a.m. And now I think people are starting to kind of understand that maybe this was more than just people chirping about it. This had a little bit more substance to that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll really have to wait and see if they actually have a quick response to this in terms of a fix, or I mean, what it even is, right? Like, they they haven't even really stated they know what the problem is. So
Yeah, and we basically, what they have is the kills are recorded. They are still working it out, but the one thing they have reassured us is the kills are recorded. I tend to believe them, and just from my own personal experience, I mean, again, this was over 10 years ago. Pretty much everything in World of Warcraft is logged, and things do get weird like this. Display issues do happen, and they have happened before. So I'm going to put my faith in it that things are going to work themselves out till Tuesday. What I would recommend to PvPers or anybody that's just hoping to rank is, cross your fingers and hope that's the case. Make sure you get what you're hoping to get in terms of your own kills this week. And if you're really worried about it, maybe kind of take a halfway approach and make sure you get some honorable kills and make sure you're in okay standing. But maybe until things are straightened out, you don't want to push as hard. Find a nice middle ground for you to make sure you don't lose any rank or anything during this time.
yeah, I think that's what I'll end up doing. There's a lot of people I know that'll probably end up doing the same thing, because I'm just looking forward for the release of BGs in a week or two here.
And this is going to be a big one. I think it's really slowed down what I think a lot of people were doing to begin with. The first week, I think the Horde had over 5,000 people registered for PvP in the honor system. Now we're looking at maybe closer to 2,500. I imagine it's dropped a little bit for the Alliance as well, just because we know Battlegrounds are coming, and it's going to streamline a lot of this, and it's going to solve a big issue which has really arisen since the first few days, which is competitive PvP is just getting harder and harder to find right now.
Yeah, I mean there's no scenario where it's ever fair. Like you're either very outnumbered or you encounter one person who's worth way too much honor for you to really feel good about not killing a couple of times.
Right, and it's created, I would almost say, like, we have this now, the new meta that's been established since, I would say, the first week. We have the hotspots that people know that people are going to, Thorium Point, Kargath, Dire Maul, the Plague Lands, and it's just become kind of this circuit where, okay, yep, these people are camping these spots again. Oh, I'm going to check to see who's camping. Oh, yep, we've got some rogues over here. Yeah, that part's out of commission for right now. Don't go there without a group. And it just sort of created boundaries in the world that are invisible, but they sort of exist. And it's hurt a lot of the fluid gameplay that we were getting early on. Running into people at random places, having evenly matched groups that were all over the place, but then were maybe discouraged because larger and larger groups started roaming around, and maybe some people that were duos and solos felt like they had to bring some of these larger groups to survive.
Yeah, I mean I've had that personal experience just earlier today, running around in Burning Steppes. I tried doing it by myself, but there's just too many large groups. I ended up having to join a party of like 8 other people, and it kept flipping back and forth. Either way too many of us, and we rolled them back to Morgan's Vigil, and then way too many of them, and they rolled us back to like the graveyard.
And especially having played this for the last couple of weeks pretty much nonstop, I mean, I'm seeing certain things like little cracks in the armor that I think the honor system maybe missed the first time around. Camping Lobies was one we talked about in the last podcast, and I'm almost wondering if that honorless target thing is something that should be existing right after someone reses now. Is it really a good thing for the game that someone reses with half health and they have 10 people surrounding their body? Maybe it would be better if they couldn't even be attacked. Some little things like that have just kind of popped in my head as maybe there were some solutions that could have preserved some of the good parts of World PvP without it becoming everybody's hustle.
Yeah, I mean, people have had similar ideas to that for a long time. It's just, I mean, you end up getting to the argument where there's still a huge group of people who want this to be as like classic as possible.
Absolutely. And the one thing that you can definitely say about the honor system is the honor system is as classic comes. There is probably never going to be another system quite like this, just because of just the commitment and the continued commitment that's necessary in order to succeed in a system like this. They've kind of moved away from this in gaming in general, even.
Yeah, I mean, it's, well, because it's brutal. It, like, the reason that server communities come up with like soft caps for honor is because this system burns people out of their game. No games come out with systems like this anymore that require you to play basically nonstop for 3 months to be able to achieve a goal.
And I'm even experiencing some of that fatigue after a couple of weeks. The first couple of weeks, I managed to get a pretty high standing, and honor issues aside, I still don't feel like I've managed to keep the pace that I was the first couple of weeks, and it's definitely left me grasping for air for Battlegrounds, for sure. I hope that, once they do come, I can get some of that energy back, but keeping up a grind in a system like this, especially without any sort of organization, is it's definitely it's fatiguing. It gets really tiring after a while, and you get to that point where you go, wow, this is a lot of work for the amount of rewards, and the rewards definitely vary per class, whether they're worth it for you or not. So hopefully with the release of Battlegrounds, we're going to see at least some of the caps and things of these systems kind of come to form a little bit more. But aside from that, it's going to be a grind. So if you're involved in the honor system, expect months and months and months of continued and consistent numbers into the honor system.
Yeah, I mean, work with the people in your server, on your faction, even on the other faction, to make sure that you know who's getting what position each week, because it doesn't seem like much now, but once it comes to rank 13, 12, and 14, Grand Marshal or High Warlord, it really matters that like people aren't screwing the entire server over by like over PvPing.
Yeah, and the thing is you can get people in and out of the system much quicker if people just work together and they say, all right, these are the people that have put in the time. And once you've put in the time, once you've hit rank 12 or 13, I think you've put in enough work to where everybody should kind of give you that spot and, let you get out of the system and let the next people that have put in that time. And it's going to make the ride much easier for everybody. Of course, you got to grind a lot anyways. If you're not able to put in quite a bit of time, you're not even going to be able to get to 12 or 13 to be able to be afforded that kind of a luxury. But once you do get there, definitely consider how much time. And I think the people that are getting deeper into the system are starting to realize that. I've talked to most people, and on our server at least, there's a lot of support for the system, but I think Battlegrounds is sort of necessary for it to really take flight.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I was calling for the early release of Battlegrounds before we even knew they were coming early is because I really can't see people wanting to play this game anymore, trying to grind rank 14 in just world PvP like that. I literally feel like that would ruin most people's enjoyment of this game.
And it ruins it from both ways. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm really not having fun killing people that I know I have beat anymore in the first place. And I don't like having to be in a spot where I'm forced to camp them. And I feel, bad I'm taking away gameplay from these people. But if I don't do this, it hurts my standing. So we're sort of in this thing where somebody has to screw somebody over, and Battlegrounds is the right solution to that, because we're going to get the people that want to compete are going to be in that arena, the people that want to grind for a rank are going to be in that arena, and the people that just want to get to BRD can get to BRD finally.
Yeah, BRD is just rip anyone going there.
And there's so many spots along the way. I mean, you get hit at the flight point, you get hit at the entrance to the mountain, you get hit at the jump to Molten Core, you get hit on the way into the dungeon itself. It's not even just the 4 diminishing return kills, it's like 10 kills along the way if it's busy, and it's pretty much busy round the clock when you have servers that are the size the ones that are classic.
Yeah, and that's the other difference between retail and retail classic and current classic is none of these servers were this big back in the day. So all of this is just it's all different than it was.
Yeah, when I played in Vanilla WoW, I was playing on Tichondrius when the honor system had dropped, and I was only level 48 at the time, so I was like the worst level to be when the honor system dropped. And I remember it being a blast. There was so much organic PvP and things were happening, but the fact that there weren't so many people around allowed small skirmishes to snowball, and like one or two people would add on, and it would kind of keep these things going. Now there's so much communication going on that, as soon as some battle happens, as soon as it starts to get a little bit big, a large group comes in, clears it out, and you kind of have these tug of wars between the two factions that usually just end with one group coming in larger than the other and clearing the other out. And that's not necessarily the optimal for competitive PvP or even fun PvP, I would say, for most people.
Yeah, I mean, I see regularly PvPing right now groups bigger than I ever saw PvPing. When the honor system first came out, I was playing on Gorefiend, and I never saw groups that roaming around in the world. It was, I mean, I think like a 20-person group was like unheard of.
Yeah, and I would say that's definitely part of the current meta right now too. Like those 20-man groups are part of what you're either thinking to join or looking to avoid or trying to keep tabs on if you're solo, even just because you kind of want to know where the protection is. And like that's just like this roaming variable now that I don't ever really remember it being, a part of classic vanilla WoW, at least for sure. But with all that being said, the one thing that's definitely happened during this phase, at least for me, is I've seen so many rivalries pop up. When Battlegrounds hits and I do go up against some people from the server, I do have the feeling like I know some people that I want to go up against, and I know some people that I am very excited to get to go up against in a fair setting.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's at least a couple of names on our server that I expect to have pretty competitive groups, at least from PvPing against them out in the wild. And it should be very, very fun to actually fight against them in a true competitive setting. Because I really don't feel like having more people than the group that you roll up on really makes for, like, I don't know, engaging or fair gameplay.
Yeah, and I understand too from the perspective of the people that are, around in smaller groups, and they're getting rolled by those groups, so then they ended up joining onto them. But again, it just sort of created this show up with the bigger group mentality to clear people out that's sort of gotten us to this point where we're like, yeah, it's time for Battlegrounds. Me personally, I think World PvP would have been perfect for like a 1 or 2 week phase. Now that I've had almost a month of it, I go, yeah, I think that was probably the sweet spot for this.
Yeah, I mean, again, you talked about it yourself, just being sort of starting to burn out. I can't imagine that there are a lot of people who aren't in a very similar place as you are. Especially with the bug we talked about earlier.
Oh yeah, and with talking to, people on both sides, on the Horde, on the Alliance, it didn't matter who you were. And you put in those hundreds and hundreds of kills, and then you saw them missing the very next day. It was scary. It was a blow. And then there was a lot of, should I even continue to PvP? And, all of that. Should I just wait until this is all resolved? And it made it maybe a shakier week in the community, a little bit more nervous about the commitment that had been getting put in. But with all that being said, we do have Battlegrounds to be looking forward to. We do have that assurance that there is going to be a resolution, so we have our fingers crossed from that. But World of Warcraft is not all PvP. It's not all PvP right now. There's still people doing dungeons. There's still people leveling up characters right now. So let's take a little swerve away from World PvP and talk a little bit about tanking.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to really talk about. And again, similar to how we did last week, I don't really want to talk about things that are part of all these guides. Like, we're not going to talk about like best in slot gearing or profession race choices. But there's some key things that I want to touch on that I think could help a decent number of people who are either just starting to tank for the first time, or maybe feel like a lot of us, that when they first get to max level and start tanking and feel like, hey, why is this more difficult than I remember?
Well, and one thing I can already say, having played a warrior, but, I leveled up as, a DPS, and I play as a Fury warrior, but I tanked all of my dungeons all the way up, and I hadn't played WoW in almost 15 years when I came back to Classic, and it took a little bit of on-the-job learning. So right off the bat, I felt like tanking was a little bit of a stressful job, but the first thing that helped alleviate it was just keep on tanking more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely the best way to get more comfortable tanking is to just keep doing it. It is a very learned skill at this point because of just how everything works interaction-wise. There's going to be a little bit of nuance based on your group makeup and what you're doing, whether it's a dungeon or a raid, or whether your group's all melee or all casters. But for the most part, it's really just, there's going to be a lot of this comes down to learning.
Yeah, and I would say that as I went through the dungeons, each time I hit like a new tier of dungeon, it kind of exposed a different aspect of tanking to me that was important to take with me to the next phase. And then by the time I had gone through all the dungeons, I felt pretty prepared to start doing things like off-tanking ads and Molten Core and stuff like that. But just things like how to deal with multiple ads, how to quickly get aggro on a single target, are all things that are going to show up in dungeons. Even things with how to deal with damage going out on lots of targets, and those things are all going to show up in the dungeons.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess let's actually start with talking about like getting into tanking and just tanking strategy in general. Once you're in like high level or end game 5-man, multi-target tanking is very challenging for a warrior. Obviously, retail and later expansions of this game really do a lot to help the class. So right now, what it comes down to is you really need to prioritize targets. It's very, very, very useful, and I find extremely important for less experienced tanking, or less experienced tanks, or groups you don't know the people you're playing with, to utilize markers like target markers, the skull and the X. Everyone knows to kill the skull first. Like, at this point, it's sort of just the game. Everyone realizes that's what you're here for. So make sure you're utilizing these target markers to help direct your damage to the things that should be dying first. Recognize that like caster mobs typically do the worst things to parties, so marking them to kill first is usually a very good idea. And it also helps with tanking when you can let a DPS warrior or a rogue tank a caster, because it's not going to kill them, while you pick up aggro on 2 or 3 other mobs, so that when that caster dies, because everyone's used all their burst on it, you're in a better position to hold aggro on the rest of the group.
That point right there, by the way, helped me a lot when I first did my few tanks of Skullomance specifically, because they have these large packs that have some really nasty non-elite mobs, and really as the warrior, I found that if I kept the elites under control, the AoE and the melee DPS would take care of those squishier mobs and as long as I kept the elites primarily and then focused on the non-elites secondarily, it made the group run a lot smoother.
Yeah, it's really night and day. Skullman specifically with that, killing the little skeletons that are immune to mana, just letting the melee and deal with that while you pick up the elites in those packs, or even the dragon handlers. The second thing that I think is very important that maybe a lot of these guides don't really touch on for 5-man tanking is the importance of LOS pulling. Even to this day, like 50 out of 50 wipes that I've had in 5-man, the last 50 wipes, have been one of two things. Either I LOS'd my healer, or instead of pulling a group back out of LOS, I, like an idiot, charged into that group, and it pulled another group, and it pulled another group, and a mob ran away into a different pack, and it caused a wipe. Like, those are literally the only two reasons that I wipe in 5-mans. They're preventable because I'm just either in a hurry or I think that we're better than that. And, sometimes you just have to recognize that the instance is going to slap you down.
Absolutely. And the thing with caster mobs too is they are very unpredictable with their behavior. They may just sit there and cast on you for like 3 minutes straight and they won't move an inch. And in that time, another roaming group comes by, and then like you said, it just starts snowballing from there. One group becomes 2 and you're like, okay, it's getting spicy. Now it's become 3. Okay, I don't know if we can take all the heat, and then we're running back after that.
Yeah, or a shrieking gargoyle appears, or an Eye of Naxxramas pulls two groups, or Strat Dead is really the worst place ever, and you should always pull back. Like, Strat Dead is wipe central if you think you could just charge into packs.
Yeah, and that was another one too, where it was really a big take care of the elites, get those other ads out of there, and then the extra thing with Strat too is you really got to know those LOS spots, or just be creative. Like, you can tell where they're at. If you can't see the mob from that spot, you have a very good chance of it being LOS right there. So just be creative and find those spots, because it'll make everything run smoother.
Yeah, my like bonus strat for Strat Dead, I typically do the spider boss first instead of second, and then clear to the Banshee and go around that way toward the third Ziggurat. I find that's a safer way to go if you're intelligent about LOS pulling. I find the groups wipe less going that route in Strat Dead than they do killing the spider second and trying to go through that little bug hallway where like the gates lock you out.
Yeah, and that's certainly definitely one of those bosses that likes to just sit there and not move with you if you let it. So that's a nice one to just kind of have out of the way in the first place anyways.
Those two things aside, what it comes down to when you're tanking, in a 5-man specifically, because this is much less the case for tanks and raids, but the thing you just need to remember most is it's your job to set the pace of the dungeon. It's your job to really make it as smooth as possible for everybody in the group. So you really need to pay attention to like how the healer's doing on mana. If they're ending every pull with 80+% mana, you can probably pull a little bit faster. If you do a pull and they're at 20% mana, it's probably not a great idea to keep pulling unless you notice like a stray mob that you can get that they probably can continue drinking through.
Yeah, I found this to be a big one, and it just sort of also evolved this way too. The group is generally going to expect the warrior to be responsible for the pacing. And there's certainly going to be some examples where maybe somebody else sets the tone of the group or whatever. You don't necessarily know like when someone's really knowledgeable of a thing when you join a pug, but do kind of expect that that's going to be your responsibility. And if you don't have that knowledge, I recommend speaking up, because more often than not, if you kind of let them know, hey, I'm new to tanking, this is my first time doing this, let me know if there's a better way to pull this. Most people are more than happy to help you out and give you a couple pointers about what they remember, and then that'll help you piece it together for yourself.
Yeah, I find it's always better to speak up like that in dungeons if you need help. I always I never mind helping people in situations like always communicate. It is the key to success.
Yeah, and like when I was going through a lot of these dungeons, I mean, I had done them all 15 years ago. They all felt brand new to me this time around. I had forgotten a lot of the nuances and things, and having someone remind me, like, oh yeah, you can only get this guy right here, or we can skip this pack there, can really help. So if you don't know all of these things, speak up. There's probably somebody that does, and it can help your own knowledge base for how to go about the dungeon too. So no, as a warrior, you're going to be expected to set the tone, but also be willing to get a little bit of help from the tone if you do need that help, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how a beginning warrior becomes, an intermediate, and then eventually an expert.
So moving up tanking, like once you actually are pretty comfortable with tanking 5 mans and really start thinking about tanking in raids, there's just a few things I want to add to this discussion about that. Most importantly, there's not really. It's important to know that I don't think there's really a right answer on what to do here. There's several. Especially if you look, on people's streams or on like different guides online, there's a ton of different guides that will tell you like, oh, you should go deep prot or you should go fury prot. There's no real right answer. It really depends on how well you feel your healers can handle things, how hard your DPS is going on all these fights. Both of the specs are very viable, and it's important that while you're going through these 5 mans, you really get a good idea of what you feel more comfortable playing.
And I think it's also important to understand why you would choose one, or what the circumstances are that you want for one to succeed. So like for example, Fury Prot, I think it sounds super cool, it's a lot of fun, but understand that the talent spec is going to be completely different. It's going to function a little bit differently, and it might be better if you're in a group that maybe has higher DPS overall, just because you're going to be taking a little bit more damage, but maybe getting there a little bit quicker is better for your group.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really where the Fury Prot build was designed. It was designed because people were noticing our groups are pushing as this very high level of DPS, and we need our tanks to be really putting out more threat. So they came up with this build that is able to put out more threat than just a deep prot warrior, but at the cost of not having a shield on most of the time. And that can really, if your healers aren't prepared for that, that can definitely mean that you get squished sometimes.
Yeah, and this is just coming from someone that's straight Fury spec, but does a little bit of off tanking. The healers can definitely tell the difference when I slap that shield on. It makes all the difference in the world. Even as someone that doesn't have the talents that go along with that. So this is the first thing that I think has to be kind of practiced out and explored a little bit before you throw that in a raid situation.
Yeah, and again, it's when you start tanking, everyone typically tanks as a deep prot spec with tactical mastery. It's very it took me a long time to get used to not having tactical mastery. It's an incredibly useful skill, and you really feel like you're going in without all of your tools when you don't have it. Once you play without it for a while, you sort of get used to it. But I mean, even now, I miss it playing Fury Prot.
To me, it almost feels like going from like a manual car to an automatic. Like you're used to having all these things to do, something with my hand. I'm going to be switching around a lot. And now you kind of just, all right, I've got a zone to be in, and there'll be very defined, boundaries when I'm going to switch.
But even spec agnostic though, really what I would say is threat ends up being the most important thing to a tank. Like I typically tank all of Molten Core and Onyxia, and I only have 31 or 33 extra defense. So it's not really a stat that you have to stack anymore. I remember back in Classic and even in Burning Crusade, your goal was to always be defense capped, so you couldn't be crit. And it's definitely not that case now. It may become that case later, but really holding aggro so your raid can do more damage is the way to go. And on that note, around choosing what gear you decide to tank in, if you have to wear a few DPS pieces to get hit capped and to get a little bit of extra weapon expertise with what you're using, I really do feel like that's the most important decision you can make.
Yeah, I mean, two pieces that immediately come to mind are the Lionheart Helm and the Onyxia Tooth Pendant. These are straight up DPS pieces, but they make their way into a lot of tank rotations as well.
Yeah, so the Onyxia Tooth Pendant is especially important for warriors because even if you're tanking now and you don't know if you're going to tank in the future, there really isn't a better neck for warriors until Nax. So I know that if you're your guild's one of your main tanks or an off tank and you finally get the head of Onyxia, that trinket's pretty juicy. It does have some good defensive stats on it, but you can get better for tanking, and passing up on the neck is really a bad decision.
Yeah, I would say, especially with where the encounters are at this very moment in time, I mean, being able to get in that extra damage, keep that threat, is certainly more imposing than most of the bosses are doing damage, at least in this tier and upcoming ones as well.
Yeah. We'll see. There may be one or two fights in BWL that require a little bit more defense, but I mean, we'll have to see. It's obviously been so long since anybody's done them on retail that it's no one knows whether or not the numbers were the way they were on private servers or not.
Yeah, and I would say private servers, without a doubt, changed a lot of the game, but at the same time, there's certainly things that we've noticed. Oh yeah, this didn't quite match up the way it did, though, in the way they did versus Classic. So there's definitely going to be that little bit of fine tuning that's going to happen when we get those bosses in early 2020.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we've got the importance of holding threat, being hit capped, making sure you have just tools in order to hold aggro, and maybe even at the expense of a little bit of defense. So that's very interesting, and kind of like you had mentioned before, a little bit of a change from the way people looked about it in Classic, or back in Vanilla, I should say.
One, I don't know what else maybe you have to add, but one other definite tip that I have, that especially if you're playing Deep Prot, don't forget that you have an extra taunt by switching stances and using Mocking Blow. Even though it's a 2-minute cooldown, I've looked through so many logs of people who lost aggro and never used Mocking Blow at all. Like, it's an incredibly useful skill. People just forget about it because it's a 2-minute cooldown and not the tanking stance.
And I think it should just also go to say, like, Battle Stance, although it doesn't have the generation of threat that defensive stance is going to get you, and it doesn't have the 10% defensive bonus, it's not the worst stance to be in while you're taking a hit or two. It's fairly neutral. So switching up to battle really quickly and using that Mocking Blow should be in everybody's arsenal.
Yeah, and I mean, especially if you're running Tactical Mastery, if you lose aggro, you can swap to Battle Stance, Mocking Blow, and then be back in defensive stance before you take a hit.
Yeah, and I find like that's the perfect fallback if, say, taunt gets resisted, right? Like that's something that's completely out of your control. You hit the taunt button, it didn't go through. Mocking Blow is your second chance at that, and if Mocking Blow, that runs out and you still don't have threat, your taunt is probably back up for one more go around. So it effectively gives you three chances to get that back. And if you don't, that's 10 seconds of it running around effectively before you're going to have a chance to get back. So Mocking Blow, definitely a big one for sure.
Yeah, it's basically the only reason in DM West I can kill the Prince without letting the entire melee section of my party die. He just drops aggro every 5 seconds.
So outside of the abilities that you have and everything, are there any other little things that you can do to maybe give yourself an edge while you're tanking? Any certain like consumables or engineering items that should be kind of just kept in your back pocket for aggro or mitigation purposes?
Well, because I am a masochist, I leveled as a blacksmith. I don't suggest anybody who's planning on tanking at endgame do that. Engineering is just too useful. Whether we're talking about getting the engineering shield, I don't even remember what it's called, the one from Molten Core.
It's the Force Reactive Disc, correct?
Yep. I was thinking of the Hypertech. I don't know, but yeah, if you're getting the Force Reactive Disc crafted, it's incredible AoE threat. If you have grenades and dynamite, it's incredible AoE threat. Like the best way to honestly tank these 5-mans is to be an engine, which is unfortunate for people who, felt their guild needed a blacksmith, like me. But that's basically the best thing you can do. Once you get into like raiding, really try and get these big world buffs. Warchief's Blessing and the Dragon Slayer buff are both incredibly huge for tanking.
Yeah, I mean, these include attack speed, which is absolutely massive for tanks, crit and health, all the stuff that you really want as a tank. I mean, it really covers all your bases.
Yeah, and as far as other buffs go, I mean, most consumables you could use as tank or DPS. Like the Mongoose Elixir is very good for tanking. It's a little on the expensive side these days. It's not a bad call. Strength gives you not only damage but block value, so strength is also good. And of course the tribute buffs are very good.
Yeah, that huge influx of stamina alone and attack power gets you again in both of those spots, survivability and holding aggro, which are really what your primary focus are as the tank. So, with all that being said, how would you say this all wraps up? So you've got all of this together. What's your next step? What do you do from here now that you've started to figure these things out?
So it really depends on the type of gameplay that you like to do. You could just be pugging stuff because you're still leveling. But I would definitely try and find a guild to be in if you really enjoy tanking. There's almost no guild that doesn't enjoy having extra tanks around. Everybody is always looking for them, and just see what you can do. I don't know if I skipped over this point before, but sort of going back over the notes, there's one thing that I do want to touch on that works that I think is important in both 5-mans and raids, that it also sort of ties into like the importance of buffs. A lot of times you can see people, if you may watch like a video of a speed clear in Molten Core where a guild does the whole raid in 30 minutes, or you may watch a streamer who's pulling like huge groups of packs or skipping packs in 5-mans, and you may want to replicate that because it looks like it made the dungeon go by faster and everybody had a generally easy time. I think it's important to to recognize where your group is at and how much experience both you and your group have doing things. There's nothing more frustrating than attempting to skip a pack and then wiping because you didn't take the extra 40 seconds to kill it, and everybody spends 5 minutes running back. What's even worse, especially in Molten Core, and I've personally been responsible for this happening at least a couple of times, is attempting to skip something, maybe not even purposefully pulling it, but maybe a shaman doesn't move a totem and a core hound pats into that totem, pulls 2 extra molten giants, and suddenly what was a pretty smooth run turns into a wipe that cost over 500 gold in consumables to your whole raid. Like, everybody loses all the elixirs they had popped, everybody loses their Dragon Slayer buffs, just because you didn't take the extra time to wait for that core hound pat and get it before you moved on and pulled. So really pay attention to what can happen, and if it's going to take a couple extra minutes to do a few pulls, really take the time to do that, because I mean, everybody can complain that you're clearing too much trash, but no one's going to be complaining more than when you accidentally wipe and cost the entire raid hundreds of gold worth of materials.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when people are putting in that much time, it's not even just the gold too. It's hour usually spent before the raid, if not more. So you definitely want to make sure that if you're going to be trying some strategies that are cool ones that you've seen on streams, things of that nature, make sure you understand all the nuances of those and how and why they work, because it could definitely save your group a wipe for sure. And all of the things that go along with that wipe.
Yeah, it's always make sure that you and your group are on the same page for how you're doing things.
All right. Well, with that being said, are there any other points we want to touch on tanking?
I mean, again, I think with what we've talked about, if you do some basic research about where your pre-raid best and sought is, and you start tanking some 5-mans, you should be in pretty good shape.
Awesome. And yeah, I would definitely recommend to anybody too that if you're have never tanked before, or you maybe want to give it a try, or maybe you think you're totally scared of the idea, definitely try. Start at the lower levels, of course, but it'll actually help round out your play as a World of Warcraft player, in my opinion. I think that having the perspective of a tank definitely changes the way you think about the way a group should function and everything. And it will teach you a little bit too when you're on the other side about how difficult it can be to keep aggro in certain situations and what you can do on the other side to help your tanks.
Yeah, it is an important job to understand well, and probably not to cause any sort of drama or tell anybody that they're not doing a good job, but it's probably the most challenging actual job to do in most situations correctly.
Yeah, I have definitely found tanking is the role that would probably create the most stress for me overall when I'm in a group situation or a raid situation. And it certainly, when I got a comfort level going, it would change, but I would say like the first couple of Molten Cores, I was definitely nervous to tank a few things. The first time I ran some of the higher level dungeons, I remember the first few BRDs were a little rough. I felt like I was sweating it a little bit at first. And that experience really helped ease up a lot of that. And now, when I hit those situations, I approach it with a little bit more confidence. And when I'm out of those situations, I feel like I can do things that will make sure that it doesn't do anything to affect the people that are tanking.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, I've tanked for years, and there's still like shaky confidence situations where you lose aggro and you wonder if you could have done more to hold that aggro, or if it was the DPS popping, sweeping strikes and death wish on a trash pack that they just charged in. So it's an extremely important viewpoint to have, for sure.
Well, very good. Well, Myth, I have to say, having you as the tank in our raid so far has been awesome. It's definitely great having a tank that pays attention to the level of detail that this game requires, like you do. So, thank you for coming in and talking some tanking with us today.
Not a problem.
All right. Well, thank you once again. We have our first interview for the show. All right, today I am here with Rookal, Warlock and Officer of the Guild GOOF. Welcome to the show, Rookal.
Hello. I'm the Warlock class leader of GOOF.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. And I've been seeing you guys in the Azeroth since the very, very beginning of the game. Can you tell me what GOOF is all about?
We're mainly a PvE guild. A lot of people have called us a Zerg guild, and I guess it's kind of there's some merit because we have 370 accounts with like 542 total characters. So that counts like alts and other stuff. So it's a little Zergy, but I don't know. We got a decent community, I think.
I think that's pretty cool, actually. The model for guilds in Classic was usually to keep them very, tight. But I'm seeing a lot of guilds now that are a lot larger, and it's supporting multiple raid groups and things like that, which kind of helps progression down the line and keeps things healthy and fresh over time. So maybe some people might throw that term around a little bit, but I actually think there's a little bit of merit there as well.
Yeah, I think it really helps because we have 4 raid teams going right now, just churning through MC. So what we do is say raid team 2 gets scenario embracers. It's okay guys, does anyone in raid team 2 need scenario embracers? And of course all 0 druids in the game say, oh, we don't need that because we're not here. And so it's okay, well, we're just gonna send it to a guild bank, and then Hearthburn, who's our guild master, will just go through the raid teams and he'll be like, hey, you're a druid, do you have scenario embracers? And the druid will be like, yeah, I do, because all the druid loot gets passed. But if they say no for some reason, they just get them.
Cool, so there's definitely benefits to being able to share the wealth a little bit like that with just so much loot dropping each week when you've got 4 raids going on. It's very cool. It also seems like it would be very effective for world bosses, and you guys were involved in 2 of the first Alliance side world boss kills already. So congratulations, by the way.
Yeah. We definitely didn't do it alone. It's the main thing, because I know some people are still a little bit frazzled about the world bosses. We do realize that probably wouldn't have killed it if people didn't help us out, so thank you to all the guilds. Obsidian Council did a bunch. Hurricane doesn't like to help with the boss directly, in case, especially on Azagos, they just like to screen in case we wipe, which is perfectly understandable. Because, obviously, if you just go in on the boss and then you get wiped, it's well, I guess now 2 guilds can't get the tag.
I can speak from experience. We're generally not bringing a large enough crew to actually defeat the boss, so we're usually there just to keep it rowdy and protect maybe the people that have the opportunity to beat the boss.
Yeah, it's important to do that, I think. It also just helps with faction pride.
Definitely one of those moments where it really does feel like Horde and Alliance are battling each other, and any sort of miscommunication between your own faction is just going to hurt you getting the boss, and everybody kind of loses in that situation. So there was a little bit of backlash. Without actually naming any names, what kind of backlash was there after the fact?
We unintentionally stepped on some toes about there was a coalitions forming. Every world boss kind of demands a coalition if you want to actually kill it with your faction, right. And we didn't know about it.
Any one guild could defeat what's going on right now. It's not just the boss.
Yeah,
it's 400 people and the boss. That's insane.
Yeah, so we unintentionally stepped on those toes. We've apologized, and we're trying to make it right, and we're trying to get all the Alliance to communicate effectively and make sure that, because the first Azagos kill, we didn't kind of intend to quote unquote snipe it, but it just kind of happened, and then the Alliance was well, if we don't kill it now, Horde's gonna get it, and it'd be better for the Alliance to get it, so we're just gonna kill it now. And so we want to help them prevent a situation like that and make sure people like in the coalitions, are rewarded for screening and for, DPSing the boss, even though they don't have the tag, but it's their fact.
Absolutely,
So.
And for anybody who wants to see what that chaos was like, it actually is the video for the second episode of the podcast. So if you go back and take a look, you can actually see what the insanity will look like, and it's definitely nothing that 40 people or one raid group could have dealt with. It needed the entire faction for sure. You guys have also been involved a lot in the PvP. I've seen at least you guys around a lot, and you have some high rankers. Are there any high rankers in your guild you want to shout out?
Me. I'm the highest rank. I was standing 10 on Alliance.
Wow, that's very
I know
impressive.
there was a bunch of people, like I think Matic and our guildmaster and Liz were like 98% in a rank 5. They barely missed the special clubhouse, which was kind of sad. But they'll definitely get it next week. They might even have enough to skip to rank 8 still. I think I'm about to die on Theradris, which is going to be weird.
Yeah, we had only a few in our guild that made it to the special clubhouse today. I was very fortunate. I got in by the skin of my teeth. I have absolutely no visible into rank 6, but it felt good to rock the Stone Guard tag, and I'm sure you're enjoying your privileges as well. We've had the world boss drama. We've talked a little bit about some of these coalitions forming as well. I know on the Horde side we're getting that going, so is there anything you want to add on to that?
We just want to make sure we all get under. We don't want competing coalitions because that just makes it way more. So we're trying to get everyone unified, and I think we're making a lot of progress to that. We might steal. I know we've heard rumors about how you guys have done the loot distribution, where it's like based on how many members you bring, you slash roll, and then whichever guild has the highest roll gets the tag, which is it's kind of a fair system. We might steal it. We're not sure. We're still talking about it.
Yeah, I'm still not completely up to date on where the coalition is at, but it's made a lot of progress on our server. I noticed on the most recent Azergos kill, things were functioning a little bit differently, so I'm definitely going to be taking a closer look at that and maybe even being a little bit more involved, just so that I know, for education purposes for my own guild, how it functions and how we can all help each other out the best.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Well, congratulations once again on your entry into the clubhouse this early on. Very cool. And congratulations once again on both Kazakh and Azergos kills so far. That is super cool. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today on the show?
Let's see. The biggest thing I wanted to talk about was the state of, like, I'm sure you've noticed around, like, there's kind of a meme about you guys on where you roll around in, like, a 10-man group a lot, like you, Zith, Ryla, all them.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of people who are kind of salty that they get, like, 9v1'd. And I saw a post on Reddit, I'm pretty sure by a Horde player, that was talking about setting up, like, a zone or something for solo PvPers.
Personally,
So-
I'm a huge fan of this idea. I think that's a great idea. There's a call right now in the world for maybe, even if you're not necessarily a heavy ranker, but some competitive PvP that's not necessarily going to be getting rolled over. I can tell everybody that might be salty if you happen to have been run into by my group and we killed you very quickly. It happens to us a lot too. So
Yeah.
we're on that end of that a lot. You can watch my stream. I spend a lot of time dead.
Yeah, I know, I've killed you. I don't know if you have honor kills counter installed, but it'll track how many times you killed someone.
They're kind of keeping track of how many times I kill people each day and how many interactions I've had where I've actually killed them or they've killed me.
You, Mao, are my third most killed since I installed the add-on at 38.
Oh my god! All right, so since I've been called out like that, I'm gonna have to see who my most killed person is, and it's a druid by the name of Dramastic.
The guildless druid? Come on, dude, he was killing it last week.
Oh no, he is killing it, and he's rough, man. He's a great player. But the reason I've killed Dramastic so many times is because he frequents areas that I'm at a lot. So I'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, there's Dramastic.
He
I
was,
gotta get my Dramastic kills in today.
He was number 7 on Alliance ranking, despite being guildless, which is very impressive. Like, he almost beat me.
Just saying, man, Dramatic. Good battles out there. You're a great player, and congratulations on your high ranking. And I'm sure I will be jumping you many, many more times in the future.
The only people above Yumao are Ultraviolet, who I know just hit 60, because I've been. It's kind of like a running joke in our little PvP group whenever we see Ultraviolet, because like every time we see them, they're a higher level.
Oh, nice.
So we watch them go from like 56 to 60, and they finally hit 60. And when we killed them, we all did like / congratulations. It was a big celebration. And then Spooky Sham at 58 is.
Oh, that's great. Our joke has been like 47s and below are off limit, but once you hit 48, welcome to Grobbulus. You're fair game. So we're hoping we catch somebody in the ding and we can give them a good welcome to Grobbulus.
47, like, the Greys are brutal in a big group. Like, if we're rolling around and we see a Grey by themselves and we're like not in a big group area, we'll usually let them go. But if we're like Siege and Car Gap down and we see like level 46, they're dying.
They're plenty happy to pile on to the action because you know they've been disadvantaged at this point in the game, and they are ready to give some of that back. And good on you if you do, by the way. If you're a level 46 that's killed me, good on you.
But yeah, dude, I've been like sheeped, I've been cheap shotted, gouged, blinded, all by Grey level players. It's killed me like a bunch.
Oh yeah,
so.
Same here. You know, it just when you're out there in the world, it's dangerous right now on Grobbulus, man. It's rough. So you've had a lot of support with this idea of a 1v1 zone. What's your call for that zone?
I was thinking we do Hyjal with Warlocks summoning up to Hyjal. So we have like dedicated Warlocks who farm shards, and then we have Rezzers who will go around and will res people, so they don't have to do like a corpse run or anything. And you just summon people in Hyjal and they just go at it.
Epic, I must admit. It will also be a little bit difficult to get there, so it's almost like an entry into Fight Club.
Yeah, dude, I was joking with my guild that we should charge like an entry fee, so like only good players like bother to go there. Like 5 gold for a summon up there, and you get like unlimited reses or something. I don't know. The main problem is going to be finding people to like res without getting honor. Maybe we have them like group up with somebody or something. It's like 1v1ing. The biggest concern we had with the zone was that it was like kind of exploity, you know, a little bit. But because of like have you watched the Classic Duelers League thing that Tips Out's been hosting? It's like the biggest dueling tournament thing that's been going on, and Blizzard, they duel in Hyjal all the time. So we don't think that Blizzard will care, but they might care. So we might have to move it if Blizzard's like, hey, stop just going here and PvPing all the time because it's kind of exploity. We don't want you. So we'd be willing to move it, but my first proposal would be Hyjal with some dedicated Warlocks.
I personally think that's a great idea, and hopefully it wouldn't necessarily create any waves. I think as long as it wasn't maybe getting a whole wave of petitions about it going on. So maybe it could kind of slip under the radar a little bit at first to get that Fight Club off the ground. I've always been really partial to the altar in Burning Steps, but it does get frequented a lot. But there is a nice little 1v1 spot if you guys want to isolate next to that, and it doesn't get as much foot traffic because it's mostly just resources spawns, and those players aren't necessarily always looking to PvP too. So if you have a few players to protect you, there's definitely some action could be had up there for 2.
That'd be a good backup spot.
Thank you, Rookal, for coming on the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to bring up before we finish up today?
That's off the top of my head. If you want to talk about the Fight Club thing, have it I guess I could just use you as my like liaison into the Horde, but I think I'm gonna try and message Kurthos on Discord because I think he was the one that made the post or he commented on the post, whatever. Oh, yeah. And he has
definitely in support of something like that because I think without having asked him specifically, I think he's just looking for good combat. He's not one of the higher rankers on the server right now, but he
just wants to have fun,
and he just wants good battles, man. That's really all he cares about.
Yeah, so I'm gonna message him, probably after this and see what he thinks of the idea. And then you can talk to your guilds and see if they like what they think.
Yeah, well, you definitely have my support, Rookal. I think it's a great idea, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are looking for some competitive PvP on the server of Grobbulus, and we talked about this a little bit on the last cast too. You know, competitive PvP is not rolling people with your 10-man group. It's not corpse camping people. You know, a lot of us do it out of necessity, so it doesn't happen to us ourselves, but at the end of the day, remember, that's not competitive PvP, and if you do want to get into some competitive PvP, be a part of the community that drives it.
Yeah, we've definitely been rolled over, and we've definitely rolled over people. We completely understand that. We try not to camp, but sometimes, like, you know, manning up and buffing up, and it's like, wow, these guys are just sitting on my corpse. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want, you know, there's so many res and, you know, they attack you situations that everybody's in high defenses right now. Well, thank you again, Rookal, for coming on the podcast, and I hope to have many more great battles with you.
Dude, I'm trying to get you to #1 on my honor kills counter.
All right, well, I'll be on a lot, so I'm sure you'll have the opportunity to get me there. All right, well, congratulations again on your guild's success and your personal success.
All right, see ya.
See ya, man. In that interview, we talked about having a zone set up that would sort of be the unofficial meeting spot for the Horde and Alliance to hold 1v1s. We talked about wanting World PvP to have a little bit more of a competitive spirit. What do you think about that idea of just the 1v1 zone? And it was proposed hi Joel with the asterisk of maybe the GMs aren't exactly going to love that.
Yeah, I actually think that's a pretty cool and unique idea. I don't think that was ever really something that we thought of back in the day, but I think that sounds exactly like one of the main reasons that I wanted to be on Grobbulus. In the first place is in choosing this server, we really were hoping for a stronger server community than a lot of non-RP servers. That was like, the idea was usually RP servers have better communities than just standard PvP servers. And that sounds like the exact sort of thing that we were looking forward to. I don't know about Highjaw though. I'd like to see it to be a more accessible zone. Like, what's a good zone that doesn't matter? Because you can't do a max level zone, otherwise there's like farming going on.
Yeah, hitting that right location is a little tough. One of my spots that I had sort of pinpointed in the world that I really like is the altar in Burning Steps. If you look slightly south of the altar when you're going up to the through the canyon, there's a little offshoot into it that has this perfect little arena, and it would make a great little spot where people could kind of crowd around and watch, and it would almost give it a little bit of an octagon feel, I feel like. But it's certainly a farmable zone, and it could create a lot of traffic that maybe wouldn't be desirable for the 1v1 zone necessarily, or maybe it would even be proposed as like the even group match zone, right? Like bring your 3-man and you can go up against other 3-mans and things.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe until like World Dragon spawn, they could do something like make that the hinterlands. Mm-hmm. Make the hinterlands the place where people PvP'd at. Because every other zone seems far too important. No, the hinterlands wouldn't be that great. There's a lot of high level people questing there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the idea of having to go to Highjaw to do that, but a zone where like there were like unwritten rules about how you acted there would be a pretty cool place.
Yeah, and to kind of go back on what your point was, that I kind of had the same assessment too about why I wanted to roll on Grobbulus, and it was sort of the same thing. I was looking at Whitemane. It was going to be one of the more populated PvP servers on the West Coast, and Grobbulus was up there, and that was sort of the tiebreaker, is that maybe stuff like this would arise. You know, the fact that we have like an Uber service on this server is sort of, you know, it got to be something that was sort of jealous from other servers. It's like, whoa, we have these people that want to do these community-run things, and having a 1v1 zone is definitely in line with that. If you do have a suggestion for where you might think would be a great 1v1 zone, leave a comment below. Leave us a comment on Reddit, on the comments in YouTube, where you think that would be a good spot, because we would love to see more competitive battles out on the servers.
Can you PvP in Moonglade?
That would actually be a great spot. I'm not 100% sure.
Because if you could be PvP flagged in Moonglade, I feel like that would be the perfect zone, because it's sort of neutral. No one's there farming, for sure. There's no questing in Moonglade, and it's not particularly far from the worst Alliance capital, but it's not like out of the way for a lot of people.
I definitely think that would be a great spot, and there's abilities to fly there easily, but there's not a lot of foot traffic. I think you might be onto something with that.
Yeah, if you can PvP in Moonglade, if it's not like a forced, not PvP zone, it feels like that would be the best place to do this.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. I think that would be a great spot for some PvPs, provided that that's allowed. I can't actually remember because I don't frequent Moonglade much, but that's kind of what we're looking for in that.
Yeah, I mean, that you're not, and that's really sort of the point of this, right? Is to make it so that there's a place where people can go, that they don't have to worry about, like, oh, I killed a lobby, or, they're actively looking for some challenging fighting.
Right, and from what I've talked to amongst a lot of the people that are ranking, is they're definitely ready for something like that. And this sort of reaches outside of Battlegrounds too, right? Like maybe you go up against a match in Battlegrounds, but then you go, hey, wait a second. Let's meet at the arena. We got some unfinished business to go through still.
Yeah, it's it'd be nice to see something like that. That'd be really cool.
Well, it definitely has my support, and if you are, like I said, if you're interested in being a part of this as well, reach out to us on Reddit, leave a comment on YouTube, because there are people on Grobbulus that are also interested in this, and you might be surprised at how far people are willing to go to set this up, because, this is it's kind of something that we feel is needed, right now in this time, especially in this age of camping lobbies for honor points.
Yeah. I mean, so another thing we haven't touched on. I'm curious about your thoughts on this. With Classic being cross-realm at launch, but having all of Classic's features, I'm personally pretty excited about a very booming Twink community in BGs.
I know already in our guild we have several people that are thinking about gearing up for Twinks. I know that the items for the Twinks, especially that 19 bracket, are starting to creep up in price a little bit, but I think that we're going to start to see a little bit of an explosion of that once Battlegrounds hit for sure. I think it's almost kind of become a tradition now with the Battlegrounds, right? Like, once you kind of done with your initial grind, you've gotten the rank that you want, let's hit that 19 bracket, that 29 bracket. I know I have my eye on a 19 bracket, Twink. How about yourself?
I'm personally leveling a druid to run flags at 29. I think the 29 bracket is more enjoyable overall, because you're a little bit more of a character at that point. But I mean, I've always been a huge fan of twinking. I had several twinks back in the day, and it was pretty sad when they made it so you couldn't really twink anymore in retail. So I brought this up because I'm personally excited for twinking. I have a lot of friends who are in both that boat and the opposite boat and think twinking is a stupid waste of time.
Yeah, well, it's every kind of bracket, every sort of level divide, the meta changes in this game a lot. And I think that this is what twinking really captured, is it's like at 19, you're going to have a certain set of classes are going to play a certain way. And they're going to play differently at 29, and they're going to play differently at 39. And each of these little nuances to the game adds a layer to it, which is really what I think made Vanilla WoW great in the first place. There's so many little nooks and crannies to explore that, the 19 bracket and the 29 bracket are going to play totally different. If you are interested in some Twink PvP, go ahead and let us know, because there's going to be some people interested, I know for sure. So let people know, get some of those good Twink items out there, because I'll definitely be getting that once I get my initial honor grind done. Another cool thing I wanted to bring up, just because I did my first Pug Molten Core today, I wanted to give a shout out to two different pug groups, or they're guilds, but they run with pugs effectively. But the Dawnbreakers and the Duskbreakers, they're two totally separate groups, but they run late night and early morning pug groups. So if you're looking for a pug that are maybe a little bit off hours, maybe take a look at these two guilds, because I ran one with Dawnbreakers this morning. It was a lot of fun. It was a really cool, great environment, a really chill vibe, and we got pretty deep. We got all the way to Ragnaros and got Ragnaros down to 10% before we ran out of time for the day. So just wanted to throw that out there if you're looking for a raid group.
I had a buddy who ran with
hours.
the Dustbreakers before he made it into our main raid back when he just hit max level, and they seem like incredibly chill people. I
had a great time, and just as a kind of an aside to that, their raid leader he's from Germany, or I'm sorry, I ran with the Dawnbreakers, so don't want to get the Dawn and the Duskbreakers confused, because they are two completely separate entities with similar names. But I ran with the Dawnbreakers, and their guild leader has just the most enjoyable, thick German accent. He's from Germany, which is why he has, the MO to raid in morning time for us, and he was super chill and cool. The loot rules were really great, so shout out to those guys. I had a great time running with you today.
On a similar note, Mastermind is actually setting up its second raid team.
Yes, we are.
Starting this Thursday, and we are looking to recruit some more people. We're really looking to recruit some priests, warlocks, and mages, but we have some room open for other classes. I think we're full right now only on warriors and hunters. I think we have like 4 or 5 hunters, and we have enough tanks and DPS warriors to really fill it out. But if you're interested in a group that's probably gonna full clear Molten Core relatively quickly and efficiently each week, we also always have spots for Onyxia. So anybody who does get into that second raid team is welcome to get into our Onyxia splits, either on Wednesdays and Mondays. So yeah, if you hear this and you're interested in a spot, let us know. We don't really have huge requirements. We do require that you are level 60, unless you're a priest, in which case we'll consider taking you at probably 58. But reach out to us and let us know.
Yep, and on a similar note too, you'd be getting in on really our first week of doing this, so you'd be getting in on the ground floor of this raid group. And if you are somebody that's new, we are going to be doing rolling loot rules, so there'd be a chance if you want to try it out first, and we have some spots open, you might get a chance to get a little bit of gear too. So if you're looking for a raid on Thursdays, check us out, guys. All right, well, with that being said, I think we've covered most of this week in Grobbulus. It's been a very PvP focused week over here. But certainly we've got raid groups going, the excitement for Battlegrounds. Anything else you want to add today, Myth?
Not really. I mean, we went over a great deal about tanking, which was nice, and like I said, we're excited to put on that second group to see where we can take that, and it's been kind of an overload.
Well, one thing I would definitely say I've kind of noticed in just sort of a difference between classic and vanilla, it would be these multiple raid groups is really kind of become part of the meta, and I'm happy to see us get that second one out, because it's gonna mean being able to take more people on into the guild and things, whereas before we didn't have raid spots, and so we had to maybe let a few good members find a place to raid. So this is kind of cool. It'll be nice to be able to open our doors again.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the main things that we've talked about too is primarily trying to recruit people for our primary roster from the secondary raid team instead of from outside the guild. So people who join the secondary raid team because they're a fresh 60, and haven't been around as long as we have pushing Molten Core, can sort of work their way into our primary roster by showing up and showing interest and just getting better at their class, where we can continue to feed sort of people to that raid team, to make sure that we're always progressing as well as we can.
Well, awesome. And I would also like to say, if you are a guild leader and you are listening to this and you would like to get some guild promotion out, please hit me up on Reddit, hit me up on YouTube, and we can work out a time to have a little chat and you can get some promotion for your guild and time as well. Though the members of this podcast are primarily members of Mastermind, and we do want to help everybody in the community get their voice heard. So please, guys, reach out and come and have a little chat. We'd love to talk to you guys and hear what you're all about as well. All right, well, on that note, I wanted to give a congratulations to Raw Dog on the Horde side and Left Shark on the Alliance side for getting number 1 in week 2 of the PvP. Also, it is time for the Grobbulus Name of the Week. Anybody who wins the Grobbulus Name of the Week can come up and trade me 1 gold, or if you're on the Alliance side, you can set up a 1 gold auction. Today's Grobbulus Name of the Week winner is Kanye Quest. Congratulations, Kanye. You are eligible for 1 gold. Just open up a trade window and I will give it to you. All right, well, I think that's all we got for today. So thank you, Myth, for joining us and that amazing talk on tanking.
You're welcome. It was fun to do.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's always great to hear from somebody that we've been having you tank our raids this whole time. We know the level of detail you put into it, so it was great to pick your brain a little bit on that today. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I hope to hear from you on Discord, YouTube, Reddit, and please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, and I will catch you all next time.